Hello, this is Pat Lynch, and you are listening to the Career Pathways Podcast. As always, we come to you each week with great faculty members from Lyon College, and today is no exception. We have Dr. Radek Szulga joining us. He's a professor of economics. He's going to have a whole bunch of interesting stuff to talk about. And we can't get the podcast going without also hearing deep, way back in the background, producer Jason. Say hello.
Hi, producer Jason.
So, I feel like he needs a nickname. Bro, I guess producer Jason.
Producer Jason. Jason for now, but maybe our all our listeners can comment and tell us what we should call Jason. PG-13 rated, please.
If you ever listen to Car Talk,
yes,
and they have those fake names at the end, right?
There you go.
Something like that for him.
Okay, so
some witty pun.
But all right. So, Radek, welcome.
Mm-hmm. Good to be here.
All right. We always kick things off just asking everyone about themselves. Okay. I don't know if you like where you're from, where you went to school, kind of all the things that took place to lead you here to Lyon College.
Okay. Well, I was born in Poland, and I lived under communism until 1986 when I came over here.
All right.
With my family. We lived in Cleveland for 2 years. Then we moved to Alabama, Auburn, War Eagle, and then I went to high school, undergrad at Auburn. I was a history undergrad, actually. Then I went for a master's in economics at Miami University of Ohio.
Yep.
And then I got a PhD at University of California, Davis. I taught for a while at Carleton in Minnesota, and then came over here to Lyon College.
Well, when you came over from Poland, how old were you?
I was 11.
11. Yeah. Now, did you speak any English at that time?
I spoke zero English. I maybe knew my name is Radek Szulga.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, that's about it. But
did you? What was the choice for Cleveland? Was it a family or?
It was my father got a job there at Case Western.
Oh, right.
So, yep.
Okay. And so you went to public school, I guess.
I went to public schools. Yeah.
With no English.
No English.
Okay.
Did you do like ESL?
There was a class. I remember this class that they had us attend. It was me and my sister and 2 Japanese kids.
Yeah. And
we were all supposed to be learning English. I don't remember learning English in it, but I picked it up really quick just because you kind of have to.
Yeah.
I think within 3 months I was fine.
And was there like a Polish enclave in Cleveland? I know growing up in Detroit,
there was a lot of that enclave, though, was kind of like older generations.
Yeah.
And there are actually significant cultural differences between like the different waves. So you have like the Poles that came here during the Great Migration, Ellis Island, 1920s. You have the Poles that came here right after World War II.
Right.
You have the Poles that came here in 1968. You have the Poles that came here during communism, or like after martial law in Poland. That's kind of the part that we were part of, and then so on. So every one of those groups is somewhat different, and I don't think we really kind of fit in at the time.
Yeah.
With the Polish diaspora.
Yeah.
So like most of my parents' friends were actually other academics.
Yeah.
From all over the world.
Was your family able to leave Poland on its own, or did you have to sneak out? Or,
we did because so my dad came over here basically on a teaching visa. And initially, it was temporary, and then we applied, and I'm actually not sure how the process worked because I was a little kid, but we got the green card.
Yeah,
I know. I remember we had to actually because you have to apply for a green card from outside the country.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to leave the United States, and we lived in Toronto for 2 weeks to a month.
Yeah,
as we applied. Yeah. That was a long time ago. So,
amazing. Here at Lyon, what classes, courses do you teach?
So currently, I'm teaching multinational financial management that Jason, producer Jason, is in.
Yes.
Right. We were just talking about his test, kind of.
That was the humorous part of the show. So.
Yeah. Yeah, they just had a test today. I'm also teaching game theory. I teach intermediate macroeconomics and principles of economics. During the fall semester, I usually teach econometrics and quantitative methods, so really math heavy.
Yeah.
And usually I do some kind of other elective. I've taught labor economics, sports economics, behavioral economics. After a while, you kind of like, you can almost teach almost anything.
Anything with economics.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of economics, I know you and I talked, that your expertise in international.
That was my original expertise, yeah.
Yeah, and amongst many. but kind of assess things globally right now, because here we have the U.S. and supposedly we have one of the best performing economies, but if you ask the average person, they're not exactly thinking that. But you have Russia as a pariah state, China. It's kind of you don't know really. The growth has slowed. You just don't know.
Yes, and
what
they're having a bit of a housing problem.
Yeah,
just like we do, and potential for a big crash. Actually, I think.
Yeah. So how when you kind of look at all that and put it together?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think America's actually doing pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is not an opinion you hear often, and I think that's mostly because of social media. These days, just being positive on social media does not get you clicks or views.
Right.
It's like everybody's trying to outdoom each other.
Right.
But you have lowest unemployment in, however long. You have inflation was a problem, but it has come down significantly. Still, I think a little bit above what the Fed wants it to be. So I believe it's about 3.5%. They went down to 2%, but they're pretty much on track on getting there. Wages have risen, real wages, so adjusted for inflation. Not for everyone, but they have definitely risen at the bottom of the pay scale.
Right.
Which is also very rare. We haven't had that happen really since the 90s.
Yeah.
So this like inequality, if you're concerned about inequality has actually fallen a lot in the past couple of years. Interest rates are high, but then if you've lived through the 80s, they're actually not that high.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of people just getting stuff from social media, which is all about negativity, and also kind of don't have a good benchmark to compare things to.
Right.
Like if you think interest rates are high now, at 7-8%, then look at 1980s where they were like 15%.
Yeah.
Same thing with inflation, right? You think 4%, 5% inflation is high? Look at the 80s and the 70s.
Yeah.
It was double digits. But that's like long in the past. People kind of forgotten it.
Sure.
Also, Americans, it's true, we don't really pay attention to other countries that much. But you look at UK and compared to us, they're doing horrible.
Yeah. What's the problem with the U? Because I guess they kind of shot themselves in the foot, didn't they, with Brexit and then it just
have anything to export or really what do they export? What's their largest export?
I
don't even know.
I actually don't know off the top of my head what they export. But I'm every advanced economy exports plenty of stuff. So I don't think that's the issue. And Brexit's kind of old, right? That predates the pandemic. So first, and this is another thing that people don't know, is actually United States, we had much more aggressive fiscal and monetary policy during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
People complain about small stimulus bills, but stimulus checks, but compared to any other countries, they're very generous.
Right.
Europe has this long tendency also, and actually Britain a bit less than the Germans, but to really, really keep interest rates high because they're very scared of inflation. Whereas in the United States, the Fed is a lot more flexible about it.
Right.
The Fed has a dual mandate of ensuring price stability and full employment.
Mm-hmm.
But something like the European Central Bank, they only care about price stability. They never look at unemployment.
Right.
So part of it, I think, is that they just let things get worse during the pandemic, and they're still suffering from it.
Yeah. What impact does the world economy have with Russia kind of being a pariah state? I don't know if they were really that much of an economic factor to begin with.
Not that much.
Oil, right? Oil.
Yeah, but look at the oil prices; they're not particularly high, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seen higher. They're not super low either. United States is pretty much energy independent.
Right.
We would probably be exporting oil if there wasn't regulations that prevent us from exporting oil, right? Because we want to build up the strategic reserve and all that. So we don't. I think before the Ukraine war, only like 1% of our oil came from Russia itself.
Yeah.
Something really small.
It's mostly like Western Europe, right?
Yes, it was Germany and
Yeah.
France that were importing a lot, and now even that's gone down because there are alternatives. And when one thing goes down, somebody's going to step in and try to fill that up. So I don't think Russia has much of an impact on the world economy. Kind of the question is reversed: is how much the sanctions and all that is affecting the Russian economy.
Now, you know what I've read is that it's not really having that big of an impact. That they've found ways with other partners, India, for instance, and then you got like a North Korea, whatever. I don't know if
That's
much
for
of a
arms.
partner.
Yeah.
Well, they need plenty of those, but but they found ways. Maybe possibly China, I guess, would be the big one that they've been able to get around the sanctions.
So one thing is that happened before the war. So between essentially 2014, when Russia first attacked Ukraine, and 2022, the second invasion, is they made sure to really build up their stock of foreign reserves and kind of financially prepare for the war.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why we haven't seen a big financial crash in Russia or anything like that. And their war chest was kind of big to begin with. I do think sanctions are having an effect, but if you're thinking that they're enough to crash an economy like Russia, I don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
Sanctions always kind of a very sloppy weapon.
Like with Iran, how long has that been going on?
Yeah, right. And so, that's a good example. Like, had sanctions on Iran forever, and nothing happens.
Yeah.
They get protests every once in a while, but
sure.
If you're authoritarian, you just squash them and keep going.
Who doesn't like a death to the U.S. Rally?
Right.
And with speaking of Ukraine, from an economist point of view, the bill is stalled right now. But when I was reading that, if you look at where the money is spent, a lot of the money isn't like we're just giving this carte blanche check to the Ukraine. It's actually going to U.S. industry to supply, to replenish weapons and ammunition, right?
There's really maybe three types of aid.
Yeah.
The first type of aid is we're just shipping our old equipment to them, right?
Yeah.
You're taking stuff out of storage that we'll never use, that we probably have to pay scrap costs for.
Right.
And we're just, here, take this old tank that has been sitting in a warehouse for the past 10 years. And that will probably sit there for another 10 years unless you use it.
Yeah.
So a good chunk of that aid is really just old equipment. Another good chunk is things like ammunition that you mentioned.
Right.
And because that we were short on, and they're short on. And that does go to American industry because that's who produces those things, right? Then there's some humanitarian aid and some aid to kind of like just keep the government operational.
Right.
And that's probably where like you could say that is the money we're actually giving them. But that's a fairly small chunk of the overall aid.
Yeah, because Ukraine aid in a way is a stimulus because the way military contracting, don't they spread it out over a number of states?
Yeah, for the places that have military bases, that have military producers, they're definitely have stimulative effects, right?
Yeah, yeah. It might sound like a political question, but I want it from an economist. What is the Biden administration doing right, and what is it doing wrong?
And economics?
Yes.
I think the infrastructure bill is really good. Some of the things are a judgment call, and really depends on your kind of ideological and political views.
Right.
So things like the child tax credit, loan forgiveness, right? This might sound kind of paradoxical, but as an economist, I don't feel qualified to evaluate them.
Right.
They are economic issues, but they're also essentially a matter of your worldview.
Right.
Economists can talk about, okay, is that the best way to achieve a particular goal? But when you're discussing what the goal is, right, that's up to you.
Right.
So you might agree with them because you support a social safety net.
Sure.
You might be ideologically opposed to social safety net, and you don't like it. Right?
And how would you describe Bidenomics? What?
So I think investment in infrastructure is a big part of it.
So that's and that's kind of that departure from Reaganomics, right?
Yes. Yeah. So yep.
Okay, and Reaganomics was
deregulation and tax cuts. That's
all right.
What Reaganomics was.
And that and in doing that, you unleashed the
market,
and
efficiency,
it's going to create jobs, and then that's the trickle down theory, I guess.
So the trickle down theory. This is like in economics. There's no such thing as trickle down theory. This is a popular term that people use.
Well, the Laffer curve or whatever.
The Laffer. We actually covered the Laffer curve in principles the other day.
Yeah.
So all these things like trickle down or supply side economics or Laffer curve, they are partly based on economic concepts. It is true that you can have a tax rate so high that you'd actually raise more revenue by having a lower tax.
Right.
And that's basically what the Laffer curve is. Question is, do we have taxes so high that if we cut them, we'd raise more money, that they would pay for themselves? And the answer to that is really no. None of them are that high.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's some obscure tax on some particular good or something like that. But generally speaking, higher taxes, more revenue, lower taxes, less revenue.
Yeah, it always concerned me, the Laffer curve. At least the story goes, he wrote it on like a napkin.
Actually, the idea itself goes back to Alfred Marshall and David Ricardo even.
Okay, so
it's an old idea.
Yeah.
And like I said, theoretically, it's a sound argument. It just depends on which side of the curve you're on.
Yeah. Now, I get with Reaganomics, the part, though, is that they also just dramatically increased spending as well, and that so they reduced taxes, but they didn't moderate spending, and so you kind of had things going in the wrong direction.
This is where I can do that on one hand, on the other hand.
Fire away. That's
the economist thing.
Yeah, no.
So on the one hand,
yes,
the first round of Reagan tax cuts, which I believe, I don't know if it was the first round. The one that passed in 1987, it actually had bipartisan support.
Right.
Because a lot of what it did was actually kind of just rationalize the tax code.
Right.
Get rid of some loopholes. You close loopholes, but you cut the rate, right? So the effective tax rate can stay the same, but now you're just creating less bad incentives.
Right.
So people are on board with that. So that was kind of the positive aspect of it. The negative aspect was that it actually did make it less progressive, and it did lower revenue, while at the same time spending was being increased because of mostly on military spending in the Cold War, right? And again, that kind of comes down to ideology. It also comes down to the question of what role did Reagan's military buildup play in the collapse of the Soviet Union? Was that a crucial factor, or would they have collapsed anyway? Right?
Yeah, that's another podcast.
Yeah.
With Bidenomics, and you have something like the CHIPS Act, so it's reinvesting to bring technology in investment here in the U.S. Is that? It's like you're building infrastructure into the U.S., which is a positive. But is there a protectionist aspect to that?
There definitely is.
Okay, and because some people, I'll say myself, when I hear protectionism, I kind of reflectively kind of that's
so I'm a little. As an economist, I'm the same way. And I think most economists are like that.
Right.
But I think these days we're actually kind of the minority.
Okay.
I think this is it's weird how the view of protectionism has changed over time and how it's moved from being a left-wing thing to almost being a right-wing thing.
Right.
But it definitely, I think, has more support on both the left and right now. And things like the CHIPS Act and so on, they do definitely have elements of protectionism.
Right.
Likewise, notably, actually, Biden kept in place some of Trump's protectionist policies, tariffs and so on. So I think that's kind of shared between the parties.
So are we are we better off kind of removing those, or is that just, like, I guess the technical way is, are we just becoming chumps, in terms of being you always hear U.S. is being taken advantage of, and so we need to.
Yeah, that's not true.
China.
Well,
yeah.
So with China, the problem is the technology stealing, supposed technology stealing. Now, there's some of that definitely going on. At the same time, basically, these companies make a deal, right? The Chinese say, you come here, you set up your shop, you're going to give us access to your technology.
Right.
All right. So it's not like anybody's getting fooled or they don't know what they're getting into. Right. It's kind of the price of operating in China. And honestly, countries have done that long before China. Japanese growth in the 60s and 70s was basically them backwards engineering a lot of American technology. It's just we're kind of more bothered by it when China does it. Right. Because they're kind of
Japan
a rival.
And Japan didn't have this increasing military and aggressive posture that the Chinese are taking every day.
Also basically still puppet state currently of the United States.
Yeah. Well, Japan.
1950s.
Yeah. 1950s.
Oh, right.
But
even by the 80s, everybody was frightened.
They're going to take over the United States.
Yeah.
The big scare in the 80s was Japan.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. It was, and I. Growing up in Michigan, they were out to kill us.
Was that movie with Gung Ho?
Yep. At the car company in the U.S. and I worked for a Japanese firm, Cow, and we were purchased by them, so we had like our own little mini Gung Ho all the time, trying to understand each other. Shift gears. As far as changes in the economy due to technology.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing is Bitcoin now is kind of like over $60,000. It's just had
it broke a new high, but then it crashed again, I thought.
Yeah, but it's up 50% for this year, and now Fidelity and some of these, they're kind of legitimizing crypto, and kind of what's an economic viewpoint as far as, I don't know if you call it alternative currency or I mean, where's that going? Or is that just a nice, easy way?
So a lot of it is just a straight up scam.
Thank you.
I mean, Dogecoin, all that stuff, like it's basically just a form of gambling, right?
Right.
And you know what? Like if you want to gamble, your business, I'm not going to judge you, but don't pretend you're doing investing because it's not investing.
Right.
I think with a couple of the big ones like Bitcoin, Ethereum, there might be some economic justification for them. They're going to serve as an alternative means of payment. People have a preference of whether you use your debit card or use cash.
Right.
So so in addition to that, you might also be paying Bitcoin. So I think there's some legitimate demand for those. But also, let's be honest, a lot of it is really about the underground economy and tax evasion and sketchy stuff on the web. Right. That's where a lot of the demand comes from.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you got this huge amount of money sitting there that's all just speculative. Right?
Yeah, and it just becomes that fear of missing out because, I mean, I literally every day see how much, it's like in my news feed, they have a little thing with all the stock index, and then you can see, the Bitcoin just keeps growing, and you think, should I invest? But I still don't have a clear concept on really what that currency is, so I just avoid it.
I think one way to put it is this way. If you're investing in the stock market, it is at least theoretically possible for all stocks to go up and for everybody to make money. It's not going to happen just because the probability would be really close to zero, but it's not a zero-sum game because what those stocks represent is the underlying productivity of the economies, of the companies that are being traded, right? But with crypto, it's a zero-sum game.
Right.
If somebody made 100,000, that means somebody lost 100,000. Right? So you can always find that person that, you make so much money.
Yeah.
But then you're going to find the person who lost it. Yeah. It's just the person who lost is not going to go around bragging about it.
Right.
But the person who made the money is going to tell all their friends.
Because what they do is anybody can make crypto. So you make your own crypto, and then you get Elon Musk to say, "We're going to the moon."
Right.
And everybody invests in it, and you're like, "Here's all that money given."
Well,
thanks.
And then you cash out and leave it.
Nobody's got it.
There's one South American country, right?
El Salvador.
That it's their official currency.
They adopted it, but now I think they kind of regret it. Well, now they might be liking it again.
Yeah, it's good.
It's silly. Well, so first of all, El Salvador actually uses the American dollar as its currency,
Right.
right? But they also tried adopting Bitcoin. But you want a stable currency
Yeah.
for purpose of, because people are gonna need to buy groceries and just boring everyday stuff. You don't need something that's super volatile.
Bitcoin for your grocery order.
Well,
Yeah.
with going to a stable currency, when I was taking econ, 100 years ago, I remember my professor just would go on and on about the mistakes we made moving away from the gold standard.
Really? Most economists are anti-gold standard.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my luck of the draw, I got this guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, because what was, oh God, it was Bretton Woods. Is that
Bretton Woods?
Yeah. So
The Bretton Woods system, which was mentioned in class, Jason.
yeah.
So that was the system until 1973 when Nixon took us out of it. So that wasn't true gold standard. It was more like a gold-backed standard.
Right.
There was no convertibility for ordinary people and financial institutions. It was only designated entities that could trade dollars for gold.
Right.
Unlike the 19th century gold standard, where you could just walk into a bank and say, "Give me that gold."
Yeah.
So that was fully convertible. But yeah, Nixon took us out of Bretton Woods in 1973 because of gold outflows. He first tried price controls. He tried tariffs. Didn't work, and then he basically said, "Hey, it's not worth it."
Yeah.
So
And then just moved on.
yeah. So Jason, what happens if you have a fixed exchange rate and free capital flows? What are you giving up?
You're giving up your own monetary policy.
There you go. It's the trilemma. Yeah, right. The trilemma.
That's right. There you have it.
Yeah. In 1973, the U.S. economy was heading for a recession.
Yeah.
Nixon probably had some selfish reasons too.
Right.
He kind of wanted to boost the economy before
Yeah. To get elected.
to get reelected. He actually, this is a famous story among economists, how he tried to bully the chair of the Fed at the time, Arthur Burns.
Yeah.
Arthur
Famous,
Burns,
yeah.
into cutting interest rate right before the election
Yeah.
to make it easier to win. And that probably played a part in his decision, but I think most economists today would say that was the right choice.
Yeah.
He might have made it for the wrong reason, but it was the right thing to do.
Well, then you kind of flash forward to, kind of the 2010s. And I guess this was like, Bush, Obama, that they like, like easing what it was like
Quantitative easing.
What is
Unorthodox
quantitative?
monetary
Yeah, it
policy.
was like it's all like, and I guess it was keep interest
So
rates.
this was
low.
2007, right? You have the financial crash.
Right.
And the housing market crash, which then spreads to the financial markets, and Lehman Brothers goes under, AIG.
Right.
And so basically what usually Fed does in a recession is try to cut the interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
And the interest rate they usually cut is the federal funds rate,
Right.
which is the interbank overnight rate. It's basically what banks charge
Move
each
money
other
with
overnight.
Yeah.
So it's a very short-term interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was that because everybody was so scared after that housing crash and the financial crash that nobody wanted to lend.
Yeah.
So essentially the market ceased to exist.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Like you go into this market and you want to borrow money, there's nobody willing
Yeah.
to lend no matter what interest you offer them.
Right.
The other policy that the Fed has is the discount rate,
Yeah.
which is banks borrowing directly from the Fed
Mm-hmm.
at the discount rate. And if they want to stimulate the economy, they'll cut that. Problem is that it has kind of a stigma to it.
Right.
Basically, if a bank comes to the Fed, says we want to borrow at the discount window, the Fed's going to be like, why aren't you borrowing from private banks?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
do you have to come to us?
Yeah.
Is there something going on with your bank?
Right.
It's a good way to invite attention
No.
from the regulators.
Yeah.
So private banks try to avoid it, right? Then the third way that the Fed can try to stimulate the economy is the required reserve ratio,
Right.
which is basically how much of deposits the banks have to keep
And
as
post
reserves.
2008, they raised that. They
no, they cut
safety
it.
net. Well, what?
Well, once the economy recovered, they raised.
Yes.
You probably think of capital requirements.
Yes.
It's two
Yes.
different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Capital requirements is basically about how much in liquid assets the bank has to have
Yes.
to operate. Required reserves is how much of their deposits they have to hold at the Fed.
Mm-hmm.
If you let banks hold less deposits at the reserves of the Fed,
Right.
that's more money they can lend out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that starts circulating. That's supposed to create the stimulus. But at that point, basically, banks were holding a lot in reserve anyway,
Yeah.
way well above the required ratio because, again, they were scared. Right?
Right.
Every bank was worried about liquidity and getting a bank run or something. So these markets, these traditional tools of monetary policy just ceased to work in 2008.
Right.
You couldn't cut the federal funds rate because no such market existed anymore. You couldn't cut the discount rate because nobody wanted to borrow because they didn't want the stigma.
Right.
And you cut the required reserve ratio, but so what when they want to hold more than that anyway? So they switched to so-called unorthodox monetary policy. There's quantitative easing and forward guidance was
Right.
the other kind. Forward guidance was essentially kind of announcing ahead of time what they're going to do,
Right.
like what their kind of long-term plan is, what they're going to do to the interest rate, and so on.
And that's Alan Greenspan. Was that the kind of?
No, that was Ben Bernanke.
Bernanke. Okay, got it. Yeah.
And then, quantitative easing was basically because usually, like I said, the Fed
Yeah.
targets the short-term interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
This is where they decided they're actually going to also try to target a long-term interest rate
Right.
because maybe the federal funds market isn't really liquid, isn't working, but there's still a market for bonds
Right.
and for longer-term assets. So they're going to try to move into those markets, buying some of those assets
Mm-hmm.
to influence that interest rate and hope that they can
Right.
get the economy going that way. It kind of worked. It took a long time. That was a very long recovery.
Yeah.
It took a
Yeah.
long time. And I guess the third part of it was the TARP, Toxic Acid Relief
Yeah.
Program.
Uh,
Oh, I was gonna
Jason,
say, so
yeah.
Speaking of like kind of modern like U.S. Economic stuff, there's been like a thing recently about like student debt
Mhm.
and like cancellation stuff, and I want to know from an economics point, right? So let's say like they do decide like this would never happen, at least not now, but like we're gonna cancel all student debt, all federal
Right.
student debt, right? Every single federal student loan that's ever been taken out is completely forgiven.
Mhm.
How much would that actually affect the United States economy compared to how everybody says it would?
I think it would have a fairly significant stimulative effect. The problem is like once you hit 3%, 3.5% unemployment, there isn't that many excess resources left in the economy. Once
Yeah.
you're like at full employment, a stimulus becomes inflationary rather than expansionary, right? So there's kind of upper limit to how much you can do to stimulate the economy with demand side policies, which is what that would be. And it made perfect sense, I think, when we were in a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everybody was scared. Everybody was at home. Savings go up. People are not spending their money to have a stimulus then. But once you kind of hit your capacity, any further stimulus is going to just bring back inflation. So if you were going to forgive student loan, that's actually the time was going to probably would have been during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, it might still be a good idea for other reasons. On the
Right.
other hand,
Yeah.
but to stimulate the economy itself.
I was gonna say because in theory, wouldn't that mean that there's more money that people would be able to spend, for other goods?
Yes.
Yeah.
But so people have more money to spend on other goods.
So then prices go up.
Either prices go up or more goods get produced.
Mhm.
Once you're using all your
Right.
resources effectively, it's going to be the prices that go up.
Well, one of the problems I saw with student loan forgiveness is it seems all the everything's stacked for to advantage boomers like me, and it's the you got the students that college is more and more expensive. They have to take more and more debt to do this. They finally get out and they're in the workforce, and now home prices are as far as home availability, home prices are at an all-time high, and it's just I look back at, think the affordability of I was able to get a home right out of business school. That my daughter makes decent money and forget it, it's not there.
I think all those things are true. Although I think they're somewhat exaggerated in social media discussions sometimes. So with housing, for example, one thing that's happened is average or median home has gotten much bigger.
Right.
It went from like 1,000 square feet to almost 2,000. So the size of a median home has actually doubled almost.
Right.
And that explains part of this difference in prices.
Right.
Having said that, it is still true that housing prices are still much higher than they've gone up regardless of that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that really has to do with local policies, not any kind of national policy.
Yeah. You mean like NIMBYism? And
Yeah,
everything?
restrictions on
Yeah.
new housing supply.
Yeah.
Kind of existing homeowners protecting their property values, but not allowing more housing to be built.
Right.
But these are like local city councils and maybe
Yeah.
state legislatures up to some point. And if you have a problem with that, that's who you should be complaining to.
Right.
Right. With student tuition,
Yeah.
I actually talked quite a bit about that in principles. But again, it's true, tuition has gone up, but so has financial aid that is given,
Right.
including grants. Let's forget about loans, but just consider financial aid to be grants. But even once you adjust for grants, it has gone up.
Yeah.
So again, it is true. Not as sometimes people look at just the tuition, and that's exploded. But financial aid has also gone up.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
With that, I think initially it was driven by increases in demand for college.
Right.
And for a while there, colleges were kind of flush with new students, and
Yeah.
we're actually benefiting. All these students bring in their financial aid packages,
Right.
right? So tuition went up. But most colleges aren't really for-profit businesses.
Yeah.
Which is, it's good in some respects, but it also means that they can do really dumb things financially.
Was there any credible for-profit colleges out there now?
There are. So Phoenix
got rid. Yeah.
I think Phoenix is still around.
Yes, it is. It got bought by
Yeah.
Oh gosh,
DeVry was around. Yeah.
Yeah.
But DeVry's getting their pantsuit off.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So those didn't really work well either.
What about making okay, so like like student debt forgiveness, right? That's that's tough. But like making actually like being like, what, from now on we're gonna just start taxing and we're gonna make college free. Like we're gonna just start making all school being funded by the federal government. How would that affect the economy? Like, is there places that we could allocate money in a budget for that?
I think so. Community college is like almost free, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, can you expand that to at least like state schools?
Right.
You're always gonna have private schools that get to decide what you want,
Yeah.
right? And I guess you could say like, oh, we'll pay your way to a private school, but then what's
Right.
gonna happen is private school will just raise their tuition, right?
But like public schools, like the University of like Arkansas or the University of Minnesota, stuff
Right.
like that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the main idea. Is
Yeah.
I don't know. This is something like you'd really want to get detailed on. A lot of European countries have that, but they're also a lot more restrictive
Right.
about who gets to go to college.
Well, now in your viewpoint, is producer Jason's what he was describing? Is that socialism?
No, I do. It's social welfare.
Social, yeah.
I was always
okay.
told by my economics teacher that
Right.
you don't want to have full blown like the whole cake, right? If the whole cake, actually, sorry, ice cream. He always used the ice cream.
Yeah.
example. If the whole ice cream was sprinkles, you go, "Bleh, I don't like it. But when you put a little bit of sprinkles on the ice cream, it's
Yeah.
great.
So this is what is socialism?
Yeah.
You look out there on social media and like, I don't know. There's a proposal for a government to build a bridge, and left wings are like, "That's socialism, isn't it great?" And the right wingers are like, "That's socialism. It's horrible.
Yeah,
Government should be building bridges."
Right.
And I'm sitting there going like, "It's just the government building a bridge.
Right,
The government's done that forever.
Yeah. So it's
So to me,
who's spending the
socialism.
money.
Yeah. To me, socialism or communism means government setting prices,
Right.
deciding where people work. It's just another level of control than just
Well,
funding a couple things.
now the Biden administration passed this. It's like a cap on junk fees, for credit card
Oh, yeah.
companies. It's like
Mm.
now the
22
most
to
they
8.
can. Yeah. The most you can charge is $8.
Right. So that's obviously a paternalistic policy.
Yes.
Kind of traditional economics would say, who are you to decide?
Yeah.
But I think there's a bunch of stuff in behavioral economics, which kind of highlights the cognitive biases, the irrationalities that
Right.
people tend to have. That would kind of a little bit justify that.
Right.
With those policies, though, I think you have to always be careful of unintended consequences.
Right.
So kind of the classic example that I used, I don't know if I used that in this class. No. This was actually somebody that, a professor that wrote a paper on this in my grad school. It was about ATM bank fees,
Yeah.
right? So when ATMs first came out, banks would charge like fees if you were a member, right? And they still do that. But some banks would charge like $5, $6 for withdrawal, and that got people really riled up.
Right.
So this guy studied places where the city council passed the cap.
Yeah.
So no more than $3 for withdrawal.
Right.
Right. And what he found is that once that got passed, even banks that were charging like $1 for withdrawal or no fee for withdrawal, all of a sudden started charging $3.
Yeah.
So the cap had kind of an unintended.
Yeah. So then
sure, you got rid of those super high ones.
Yeah.
But the ones that were lower,
and they could still come out to be the good guy.
Yeah, they facilitated collusion among the banks. That's what it did.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So.
Well, let's.
But I think that one's fine. The one you're referring
kind
to.
of change subjects a little bit to something like real easy. Global warming.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Really? Yeah. We should methane into the atmosphere.
Yeah. There you are. Yeah. But how that's one of those that we set targets. They set global targets, but then it's kind of the how is it with China and India, Africa that are all they're in a very different economic stage than Western Europe and the U.S. So how is that ever going to be achieved?
I think there's kind of equity issues.
Yeah.
Which basically, I can understand the point of view of some of these poor countries, which are basically saying like, hey, you used to be poor, you polluted the planet, you got rich.
Right.
Now you're going to tell us we can't get rich.
Right, right.
So I definitely understand that. But at the same time, like realistically, I don't see people in the rich countries agreeing to have massive payments to people in the poor countries just to get them out to pollute.
Redistribute.
Yeah, we'll do some like token stuff, like here's we'll fund some solar panels, but on the scale that it would need to be done, it's not going to happen.
Well, how can it be done? Because it's all of a sudden I look at it and I become kind of defeatist. That it doesn't seem like it's
so.
Possible.
The good news is that the faster the country develops, the more they start caring about the environment.
Yeah,
right.
Kind of like China, and you look at
so
air quality in China.
And it usually starts with just plain air quality. Smog. Smog used to be a huge deal in the United States. You never hear about smog.
Yeah.
American rivers would catch on fire, like Cuyahoga.
Yep.
In
There you
Cleveland,
are.
Right?
Old home, man.
Yeah. But you never hear about rivers catching on fire because people started caring about it, and once you're rich enough, you kind of can afford to start cleaning up.
Right. Right.
England got reforested. Right.
Right.
So the optimistical view is that if we can get poor countries to get a little bit richer, then they're going to start taking care of their own, and at least partly solve the problem. Question is that going to happen fast enough?
Right.
And that's kind of the big elephant in the room.
Yeah. 20 years from now, kind of, looking at where things are, kind of where will the world be?
Oh my God.
Economically. I mean,
we'll be richer.
Okay.
I think one of the stories that people miss and all this doom and gloom is just tremendous reduction in poverty, world poverty. That has happened over the past 20 years.
Right.
Usually China is gets highlighted, right?
But India's done it as well.
India's done it as well. Bangladesh, even a lot of sub-Saharan Africa.
Right.
So even if you put China and India aside, there has been a very big reduction in world poverty. Usually now famines only occur if there's like a civil war, a conflict.
Right.
The number of people that are desperately poor has definitely fallen as a share of population and maybe even as total. But you never hear about that.
Yeah.
Because it's positive news. Nobody cares about positive news.
But is there a point in the future where all of that now it's now the China, like the beginning of the China century, like with the U.S. and we're a powerful economy, but we're
in
more
decline.
Or are we more like a UK or something like that?
I think we're too big.
Yeah.
Population-wise, anything can happen, of course.
Yeah.
Who knows? But so if anybody's going to overtake us, maybe European Union put together.
Could they ever work?
Yeah.
Yeah, work together. Yeah.
China still has a long way to go.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, maybe militarily they don't, but like
Right.
as economically, still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how big the gap in per capita income is
Mhm.
still between China and the United States. So maybe a block of other nations could
Right.
overtake us, but I think we're gonna be top dog for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
And by the way, I don't believe in BRICS either.
you,
BRICS?
yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
No, it's a made up thing in completely different countries that really have no interest, no
Yeah.
common interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a marketing thing.
Love it. Yeah.
Right.
There you go. This is a podcast about careers.
Oh yes.
So, for our students who are become economics majors, kind of what career options are available for somebody that leaves Lyon with a economics major?
So almost anything, honestly. It's one of the most versatile and sought after majors.
Mm-hmm.
Like basically anything that a business major can get you, economics major can get you, and more.
Yeah.
So there's, of course, the academic path.
Mhm.
I would actually not recommend it.
Just competitive, or
I don't think an undergrad economics education really makes you aware of what is needed to get a PhD in economics.
right,
There's a huge jump between undergrad and grad,
right,
and that jump is called lots of math,
yeah,
right? Like serious math, real analysis,
yeah,
and
yeah.
linear algebra. All the calculus.
I've seen some of the stuff you leave at the copier, and I run from it.
And my stuff's like outdated too. Like the stuff they're doing now,
Right.
It is also very, very competitive to get into
Mhm.
these schools. The good news is that like if you get a PhD in economics, you'll do great.
Yeah.
But it's not for everybody. You have to love math, you have to love modeling, statistics, and just
Right.
be really into it. So for most people, I would not recommend it. Sometimes you do see that
Sure.
student, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you'd be perfect, but that's not typical. So if you're not going to do academia, what can you do? Banking, insurance, very obvious, right? Consulting. I was kind of trying to think of some more like a little less obvious career paths,
Yeah.
but
But it's it's
very
it's-
flexible.
But yeah, the flexibility comes from the kind of the rigor and the kind of the critical thinking that you need to study economics.
The combination of kind of like real world applications, right?
Yeah.
Because we're pretty well grounded in
Right.
real world, with like the ability to think abstractly. We like to take real world problems, kind of abstractify them, simplify them, get them down to essentials, try to
Right.
understand them, and then take that back and come up with solutions. So another career path, any kind of government job.
Yep.
Right. Economics degree is going to help you a lot with that.
Mhm.
Nonprofits, right? So
Speaking of career paths, you young Radek,
Mhm.
that there was a point in time you may have been a musician.
no, I was never a musician.
Okay.
I would not insult other musicians.
But you were in a band, yes?
I was in a band.
All
I
right.
played drums.
Played drums.
Yes.
Okay. So were you like a Ginger Baker, John Bonham type drummer, or a Ringo Starr, or
I was like struggling to keep a beat kind of drummer.
yeah, okay, struggling to keep a beat drummer. Okay.
And I could do like maybe one, like do 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 do.
Yeah,
That was my drum roll.
Oh man, what kind of music were you guys playing?
So somebody described us as if Marcel Duchamp started a band.
Okay.
Right? You know Marcel Duchamp?
Nope. I that one passed.
He was
by.
the Dadaist.
Oh, okay.
the
Okay.
artist, right?
Yeah.
From Dada.
So
I think that was kind of trying to say not something positive about us.
yeah.
'Cause
Okay.
we're so bad.
Yeah.
So it's like Dada except music.
like Sun Ra or John Cage or something like that. Where it's just like kind of random noise.
I do not wish to insult these people with these comparisons. So the band was me on drum, my friend Chad on bass.
Yeah.
This kid named Carmichael on singing. He was a really, really short, scrawny kid.
Yeah.
And then my friend Genevieve, who was the only one out of us who actually knew how to play.
Yeah.
She played the flute. So basically, the three of us like make this awful racket. Me banging drums, trying to play bass, and Carmichael trying to sing, sounding awful. And then there was these super beautiful flute melodies over all of it, right? So it did have this kind of absurdist part of it.
That
aspect
sounds great. So what made you give? This sounds super promising. What made you guys give up on the dream?
I went to grad school.
And the story ended.
Yeah, or I think Genevieve went to grad school first.
Ah, okay. So the musician left the band.
Yeah, the musician left the band, and there wasn't much left.
Well,
But we're called the Pink Poodles.
The Pink Poodles, and that is in reference to.
Actually, my friend John made it up, and I don't know if he was aware where he got it, but it may have been a reference to the girl gang in
Greece.
In Greece, yeah.
Pinky Custodero or Custodero, I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, that's a great way to kind of end this podcast. So thank you, Radek.
Yeah. From Pink Poodles to Economics at Lyon College,
and all things in between. We've covered the globe. And so with that, I'll just thank everyone for listening to the Career Pathways podcast. I cannot close the show without asking producer Jason, how exactly do you find the Career Pathways podcast?
You search it up. No, you can find the Career Pathways podcast on all platforms, 99.97% of platforms. It is the amount of bacteria killed by Germex.
So there you go. So we were
kill
talking.
bacteria.
We're talking international and global, and so is the Career Pathways podcast. There you have the voice of authority. So thank you very much, and we hope you keep listening to us, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye. Okay.
This broadcast is sponsored in part by Lyon College and by Kilt Studios. Holy, 3 pages?
Oh, man, I was prepped.
Wow. Uh-oh. You're under siege here.
All right. Yeah.
No, it's
Right.
So.
Yeah.
okay.
This is in the previous podcast. Notice it was like hiding always behind the microphone.
You did that on purpose. It's funny enough. Because I had it up where it was like, you can see it, and then you went, and you slapped.
No, I think it's just me relaxing.
Yeah, you're getting relaxing, and it kind of took over, covered your face.